G'day everybody and welcome to the Campfire Project. Today we've got a special discussion around men and what men need, and the what's it now report that we've got a new minister in government in Victoria for looking into the behaviour of men and how well that's going to work. Today I'm lucky enough to be here with, first of all, Angela Heise, Kerrie Atherton and also Scott Carson. Now, of course, this is the first one that we're actually running on the Be Connected platform as well. I'm going to ask each of you to give a quick description about who you are. Just introduce yourself. So, Angela, you go first, please.
Thank you, Alan. So my name is Angela Heise. I am the leadership and human skills expert, and I work with people on all of those skills that we're all supposed to have, but that nobody really teaches us.
Thank you. And Kerrie.
I am a counsellor and a mental health advocate, a mental health first aid trainer, and I also host community empowerment events and live Q&As called Stories of Hope Australia. And I'm also an ambassador for the Fearless PTSD organisation and just about to join the board of directors for Mentoring Men Australia.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Scott.
Life is better with a smile, yeah? So Scott Carson, the heart of the business of smiles, and we've got a heavy focus on supporting men with their hearts, having the courageous conversations to bring men together so that they know they're valued, they're loved, and they're supported.
Thank you. And everyone knows I'm Alan Stevens. I'm a profile and communication specialist. I'm also the creator of the hashtag initiative and the Campfire Project. And I'm lucky to have both Angela and Scott as my co-hosts in there as well. And Scott, as you just mentioned, the Business of Smiles, which he is the managing director of, and I'm lucky enough to be one of his directors in there as well. So we're all passionate about bringing people together, and the hashtag We Together was created to realize that when we point fingers at people, we just create more barriers. But when we have conversations with people and we look at the problem together to solve it, that's when we actually come up with solutions. Angela, this came about, the discussion today came about from you sending me a message after seeing the report about Jacinta Allen down in the Premier of Victoria, putting somebody in Parliament to look at the behaviour of men, which I think it's going to be a disaster. But would you like to start us off on this conversation, please?
Well, when I read that, and I read that Tim Richardson became the new secretary, the Parliamentary Secretary for Men's Behaviour Change, I immediately thought, what are we doing? I mean, we're already a nanny state. You know, Australia is we're just regulating more and more, and we're just we're generalizing the behavior that some people have and making it applicable to the whole population. And there's penalizing, there's stereotyping, there's all sorts of stuff happening, and I think we just need to lift this in a different way. It's got to become something that people want to aim for rather than having to be afraid to be punished for something. But that may be, I mean, I always believe more in the carrot than in the stick, but I just had this moment of what are we doing? So I thought it would be worthwhile having a discussion about it.
Brilliant. And Kerrie, I know with the work that you've been doing, you've been a strong advocate for men and treating men the right way so that men can also behave the right way as well. And with your going on to the Mentoring Men board, which I think is absolutely magic, especially with the work that you do, your feelings about this. And let's just talk in general about not just that, but how we're looking at men today and how we're trying to improve them, but whether what we're doing is actually working the right way, whether it supports men to do the right thing or whether it makes judgments of them and pushes them away.
Well, I can only go based on what I'm hearing from other guys out there. And a lot of men have actually expressed to me that they feel very boxed in by the way the media is portraying men. So for the actions of a few, many are being put in the same box. And I even was having a discussion with somebody last night who said that they're actually feel like they're questioning themselves every time they hear something. They feel anxious and think, am I being the right kind of a guy? And this guy is one of the most gentle, respectful guys that you could ever meet, but it's triggering for him every time he hears, you know, men this, men that, men, violence. And something that really occurred to me after a discussion that I actually interviewed someone for my podcast a couple of weeks ago who himself was a domestic violence survivor. And often in the counselling arena, and I'm not making a blanket statement here, but we do see people going on to repeat the learned behaviour unless somebody shows them a different way. But in rare instances where the trauma's been so great, those individuals will say, I am never going to be like my father or never going to be like my mother. And if you think about it, with domestic violence and children, it's often never the girl in the family that gets the beating or gets hit. It's often the boys. And so we've got a generation where mostly in families, boys have been the ones that have copped the hard punishment. And unless someone's showing them a different way, that's their normal, that's their framework for how you go out into the world and deal with when things go wrong. But I wondered, when all this talk is going on constantly, how triggering it must be for all those boys that have been subjected to domestic violence and who are victims of violence themselves, whether they then go on to become perpetrators as well. But so triggering for all those guys out there that are victims of violence, and also at the hands of women. I know, and I've counselled men who have been victims of violence by women. So we need to look at violence in our community, but it needs to be a standard approach for, let's see how we can help everybody not become perpetrators and how we can help people turn around from what they've seen and learnt in the past.
That's it. Well, I've been looking at a lot of research, and I can realise that it's not a gender issue that we've really got, but I'll come back to that in a moment. But it's, as you said, you know, you bully somebody. There's like a lot of bullies that were bullied. That's how they became bullies. That was a learnt behaviour, as you said. Even with adults, with the Campfire Project, when it first started, coming up to 6 years ago on the 13th of next month, I started that because of so many men who I was talking to, and asked them about, well, what's your role at home and what's your role at work? What's it like? You know, give me one word to describe it. And they said either confused or frustrated. And when I said confused, well, confused with what? Especially in the workplace, it was a case of, I'm told that, you know, I want to do the right thing, gender equality, political correctness, but what I say today, I'm fearful of tomorrow. I can't say that because the goalposts have been moved. And that was causing frustration. And that frustration, in some cases, you know, especially then at home, thinking that my job was to bring the resources in. And now I'm told I'm absent from the family, so I try to be at home, and then I'm told where's the resources, I can't be in two places at once. And that frustration was building up, and the men had no outlet because they felt they were pushed into a corner. And that's why we started the Campfire Project, and this is where a lot of this stuff has been coming from. Now, Scott, you're working with men all the time. You're out there talking to them in the streets. You're running dinners and everything through the Business of Smiles. What are you picking up on all of this?
I've been thinking about what best to open with, right? Because violence is an horrific thing. And I think we need to start by understanding what violence is. Because recently I've been having a lot of conversations around modern day male role models. Jordan Peterson is one for men that it really has a voice. And he says a harmless man is not a good man. A very, very dangerous man who has it voluntarily under control is a good man. Now, hearing that statement initially, I thought that was physical. I thought a physically strong man. That's the picture I had. I've since realized that any human has a tool or skill set that they can use to weaponize against another. The true strength of character in a human is to have a skill set or a tool and use it with love rather than fear and hate. This is a weapon. This is a weapon. This is a weapon. How we use it can be violent, or we can choose to love with it. When we think domestic violence, we focus on the masculine physicality against a woman. We don't consider the other acts of violence. I am so grateful we live in this day and age where we're starting to have these conversations and get a better understanding about the impact we have upon one another so that we can walk forward. Why is that relevant right now to how we think about men? I have seen more men work on themselves to become better men, better husbands, better fathers than I've ever seen in my life. I see men understanding their role in society is not just to be a good father and a good husband. It's now to be a good man because we're being represented everywhere. You are a role model for every other man and every time you step out your door. How are you turning up? What are the choices you're making today that are going to make tomorrow better for our future generations? With that being said, our men feel bashed. They feel silent. More men than ever having their kids taken away and access denied. It is killing the fabric of our society. There's a gentleman by the name of Michael Flood, who's a professor in Queensland, that I've been trying to have a conversation with because he's very active inside the domestic violence arena, and he demands that all men do more towards supporting females. I'm happy to support the other half of the planet with love and appreciation, but please don't label us all that we're all violent. Please don't give us things to focus on that are a negative activity. Please call us in rather than calling us out. Here's a ticket item for you. Men are amazing fathers. Men, since COVID, have been given the opportunity to be more present in their children's lives. And we're doing an amazing job because we're less emotional. Yeah. So we're able to sit and work through problems easier than the mothers majority of the time. Yeah. And we are reaping the rewards of that no end. We are creating connections with our children and growing beyond anything we thought was possible. And it's amazing. But now we've got this massive power movement for women. And it's great. I love seeing a woman in her power. But what parts of your heart are you missing now?
Yeah. See, to me, it's looking at the whole picture, looking at it, understanding. See, listen to understand, not to just respond, which is what everyone seems to be doing at the moment. I don't condone people's actions, but I want to understand why they do the things that they do. What is the real true story behind all of this? Because we know that as far as suicides go, 9 people a day commit suicide. 7 of those are males every day in Australia. We've got a lot of the road deaths. Half the time, a lot of those with men, we class them as road deaths, accidents, but they're steering straight into trees because it's another quick way of taking your life. I felt that way myself about 30 years ago. I looked at a tree as I was driving down the freeway or down the highway and thought it'd be so easy just to steer into it. So that sort of thing, there's a lot of those things coming from it as well. We've also got, if we look at the stats, the amount for domestic violence where the male is the recipient, where the female is the recipient, the end result is in a heterosexual and also a lesbian relationship, they're about the same. And in fact, lesbian relationships are slightly more. This is why I say it's not a gender issue. It's a society issue. It's one that we all have. But we also have those men who are committing suicide, etc. How much of that is due to the emotional impacts of, as you said, Scott, not seeing their children from the breakups of families. There's all of those things that are coming into it. We see the men, I think it was 34 women were murdered by their partners the other year, and this recently went to 38. So we had an increase of 4, and we've got this great movement of telling men they've got to change, but yet what we're seeing to happen to men, we're not doing anything about that. And this is where we need to look at it and go, okay, let's take the gender out of it and let's look at real story of what's really going on here and how do we actually address that? Because again, we've got to come together.
Alan, I'm happy to share a bit about my story.
Yes, please.
Because I was in several abusive relationships and violent relationships as well. But there was one relationship for 3 years when I was 18 to 21. And it didn't get to the physical violence, but there was emotional abuse. He would scream obscenities at me day in and day out, smashed everything I owned, humiliate me. So there was all other kinds of abuse. And the day I left was the day that he actually put his hand up to hit me across the head. But I want to talk about this because this is something that's never talked about. I became so damaged in that relationship, and he brainwashed me to think that all men were like him. And that was what he used to say to me constantly. So then when I left that relationship, 6 months later, I found a wonderful person that was the type of guy that I always wanted to end up with, but I didn't think I deserved because I actually had no self-esteem left. And so for the next 2 years of that relationship, I was very aggressive towards him. I totally lost control of my emotions. I was so desperately insecure. I did everything I could to push him away. And in one sense, that could be labelled as a domestic violent relationship. And when I actually shared about how much I had changed, because I had a real breakthrough and I got help and I learned how to deal with the anger and jealousy. So jealousy is a massive problem here that we're talking about, which fuels any kind of abuse. But when I learned how to deal with that and how to find healthy ways to deal with that, I totally changed. I've ended up marrying that guy, and we've been married for 37 years now, and we have a great relationship. But when I went public and actually dared to share that, I was actually taken to the cleaners by some guy on Facebook. And he abused me for sharing that story and said, oh, how disgusting, how dare you treat a man like that. And so I've never been game to share it again. But I'm happy to share it today because it's an example that it's not just men that are perpetrators of domestic violence. Hurt people. I also want to talk about the role that alcohol and drugs play in violence as well, because that's never addressed. Let's address the underlying issues. A lot of actual physical violence is fueled by alcohol and drugs, but yet there's nobody coming into Parliament to deal with that and try and do something about our addiction crisis in Australia.
That's it. And where is that coming from itself in the first place? See, we've got the physical actions and we've got the emotions, and my belief has always been the emotions come into it first and the physical acts follow. Angela, this is your expertise is in the emotional side of things. And so, would I be right in saying that when somebody's triggered emotionally, that's when they then act out, etc.? So we should be looking at is not so much the physical aspects that are happening at the moment. We want to start somewhere. Start with the emotional triggers. What's been happening with the women? What's happening with the men? Where's this all start so that somebody then flows on and does something that then becomes something else again?
Yes, that's what I'm really passionate about. This whole thing about anger is a negative emotion, and so we need to suppress it. And then at some point, it has to come out because we can't hold it anymore. Because I generally say we've got an internal toxin vat, and when that is full, it will just explode. And then whoever is in front of the person will get it. And that unfortunately is often family or nearest and dearest. And so showing that anger can be expressed differently, that is actually a positive thing because it reestablishes boundaries. And when you manage that in a constructive way, it strengthens the relationship. The problem is we don't know how to manage anger. We don't know how to have the conversation about it, because a lot of the times these days, people either leave without having a discussion about it, or they reciprocate, and then it becomes a totally different story. And when people have the skills to do that, then physical violence doesn't happen. In fact, then any kind of situation where people have anger or frustration becomes an opportunity for resetting, for strengthening the relationship. And Scott is smiling.
I'm looking at his smile. I know there's something about to come out there.
I was just about to say, I'll hand over to you now because you've got something to say.
Come on,
Oh,
Scott.
no, look, I'll just sit in that because, anger is one of the greatest tools you can have if you know how to use it. Right? If you get curious about it and you look for the triggers and find out what is actually coming up. But we need safe places to be able to do that.
Yeah.
One of the greatest things that I've ever had in one of the nights I ran was a guy that came in. He had a busted hand, is in a cast. Life was horrible. His business was going down the gurgler. Partner had left him. So full of anger, and he's walked in. I don't even know why I'm here. Oh, giddy up! We got a live one. I'll fish. What's going on, mate? Right? And for 45 minutes, we had 20 plus men sit there and fish with him, get the anger out, become curious. By the end of the 45 minutes, he was exhausted. He's now almost two in charge in Smiles for Life for Frankston, because he had somewhere safe to work through it. Then he got an understanding about it. And then he was able to really focus on life and change the direction of life. That's how I felt. I felt that because it means this much to me. You don't get frustrated and angry about things you don't care about.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, well, with the Campfire Project, the number of people that came in and told their stories, never been able to tell them before, and sitting there and letting it out. This is the thing that we've listened to people, not to judge them in any way, but to understand them, so then we can look at issues. The biggest problem we have is society, this generally speaking, society wants to blame people for things, because when you can blame somebody, you can stop thinking. It's no longer your issue. You've gotten rid of it. But the problem is the issue doesn't go away. We need to understand what's going on and have those conversations to understand somebody, not condone their behavior or anything else, but to understand in the first place. And in those conversations, as you found with that guy, Scott, that he got that anger out where he was able to think. I got that lesson about, what would it be, about at least over a decade ago. I had a guy sitting in the car with me. He was running an event. It was a health event. I was one of the speakers, and there was another speaker who'd been driving him nuts. So we're sitting in the car driving along, and I asked him how things were going. He went into a tirade about this guy. And I said, well, what are you going to do about it? And he went even deeper into the tirade. And I just let him go. And at the end of it, I said, can I ask you one more question? And he said, what's that? So I asked him the same question again. What are you going to do about it? And at this point, he got the anger out, and he came out with a plan of approach that he was going to put into it. We had a great event. But if I had stopped and said, took sides with him and said he was right or the other guy was right, whatever, and found blame, it never would have been solved. But the fact that the funny thing was, this guy was a mediator. I'm thinking, right. But, we all get him. It just proves within his role and everything else, the emotions we hold, if we can't get them out, as you said, Angela, they're going to come out the wrong way. So we need to give each other that time to actually vent, talk about what's going on, listen to understand them. So then we can step in and go, okay, not tell them what to do, but ask them questions. I don't know what that would be like, but if, would this have worked? Is this something you could have tried? And you ask it as a question, not as a statement, and let that person get involved in it and have a conversation. And look at the number of people we've had in the Campfire Project and the conversations we've had there, and the relationships between all the men and the women in there. Absolutely magic.
So sorry, Kerrie, I'm going to jump in, then I'll let you go quickly because the discussion is the demonising of men, and the reality is media is doing that. They are projecting it and coming at men feverishly. Why? What agenda does that serve? What do we need to get curious about? What do we need to understand? Recently, I've been looking at lots of different figures. There's 90,100 lawyers in Australia. Right? There's only 60-odd thousand hairdressers. That's a lot of expensive haircuts. Yeah. I'm seeing a lot more men no longer using the court system that does not serve them. They're not using lawyers to defend themselves. They're starting to defend themselves. They're sick of feeding the narrative and the beast. So what's really going on? What is really going on? Who's feeding our amazing women, the mothers of our children, that they should be in court fighting for more instead of working together to create better environments for the very reason they're there? Children. So who's creating the narrative? I'm more than happy to have a portfolio for behavioural change for men, but let's look at the human experience. Let's look at how we can support women with their emotions and get the value back in the family. And we're in the court.
Change it to a department to look at the behaviour of all people, not just picking. It's even if we look at inclusion and diversity and all the rest of it. When we create a group that looks after a certain amount to make them fit more into everybody else, we start a separation every time. That's why we're having so many issues, because everything out there is about, we talk about inclusion, but we're really creating something of separation. We need to sit down and have these conversations. I almost jumped in when you were saying then, why is the media doing this? And I thought, hang on, I'm going to do what I said you shouldn't do. Because really, we need to be asking questions, not making statements about what we believe, but asking what is real, what is really true in the background. Where is this stuff coming from? What's the reason for it? The media might be doing something, but what's driving the media? The journalists, not just the journalists that are doing it, but what's driving them? What's behind that? What's behind that? So we can get back to where the real situation is. But we need to look at all the different things that we're doing and how they're interacting, because we know that 80% of the most violent crimes against women that are perpetrated by males are perpetrated by males who didn't have a father. And this is one of the things that we need to have, bring that side of it back. We don't need to have the father in the house themselves if their partners can't get on, but they need to co-parent. And I don't know because I'm separated, I've got 3 sons and all the rest of it. The end result is, but I don't know what these other men went through, because I was lucky. My wife wanted to go and find herself, and I kept the kids. And I jokingly say I gave her the sports car so she could get there faster, and I kept the boys. And best deal I ever had, because I didn't have to go through that pain that those other men went through. And I had the privilege of being able to watch my boys grow up into really great men. And I had some really good men around me who then became role models for my sons as well. And then it was build a relationship with their mother so that she could then come back in, so they could learn to respect her, so that way they would then respect women that they were going to meet themselves. Because they didn't respect their mother, they wouldn't respect other women. So this is all bringing everything together. It's not because I've been smart about this. I've just been lucky. My circumstances have been such that it was easy for me to do things. But there's so many men out there, the majority that you talk to, Scott, who have never had that opportunity.
Correct. I really want to hear what Kerrie's got to say, because I feel that Kerrie's got some magic that she's about to drop on us before I talk a little further. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have a lot of desperate dads here on the Sunshine Coast, and I don't know what the laws are like in the other states, but there's been a very, very stringent domestic violence law passed here in Queensland. And if there's an act, a 5-year domestic violence order is placed on men and women, but I'm hearing from men. And the thing is, the tiniest thing like a text message, and I'm not condoning someone sending a text message that's abusive, but a text message that might have a hint of frustration or anger in it, that's a breach of the DVO. 85% of our police up here in Queensland are busy taken up with breaches of DVOs. And I've heard from, in my counselling, lots of these breaches, and these guys feel just totally, absolutely helpless. They 5 years, and they assure me, they look at my text messages. I haven't actually said anything abusive, but it has a hint of frustration or arguing with what's been said, or trying to change a date or something like that to see the kids. And yeah, it's crazy. But look, this parliamentary appointment, we don't know what's in store yet. Hopefully, positive enforcement and changes, and encouraging people to participate in programs like mentoring. Like you talked, Ellen, about the statistics of the guys that don't have fathers. What a fantastic opportunity for mentoring men, for, those guys that didn't have a positive role model, to get a mentor alongside them and show them, give them a hand up, show them a different way to, as you were talking about, Angela, to respond to those emotions, and to not have to react in the way that they have reacted in the past. And for the actual mentors, there's such a sense of fulfillment and purpose. And I'll give a trigger warning now, but our suicide rate is amongst the highest amongst men over, I think, 70. Those guys that are signed up to be mentors at that age, all of a sudden they've got a purpose to live. They got the goal to give those guys who didn't have a role model or a father, to show them that they can do things a better way.
See, I like looking back at Indigenous times, because that shows how everybody had a value in different roles that they took on at different ages and everything else. Because the grandfather was extremely important, especially when the boys were going from that age of 7 to 14, when they're getting prepared, ready to go through their rites of passage. They had the grandfather around, because grandfather couldn't go around chasing the kangaroos and things like that anymore. He couldn't hunt like he did before. He would then be more at home. But he's also the father of the child, was also, the son was also there as well. And in that role, both of them were preparing the boy ready for the tough love they were going to get from the other men. Because the dad's job is not to turn his son into a man, because otherwise he becomes a clone of him. We're not carpenters, we're not sculptors, we're not supposed to turn our sons into something. We're gardeners. We nurture them so they become the best versions of themselves. But by looking at the other men when they go through their rites of passage, virtually they're classed as men, but they've virtually got an open book, and now they're starting to fill that book and learning. They take a bit from all the other men, and in that process, they create their own identity, which is uniquely different to everybody else. So they have value straight away. And then as they get older, well, the oldest person I've interviewed in the Campfire Project was Ted. He was 99 years old. That was a few years ago now. And so sitting and listening to his story, and Scott, I know that when we're up in Lismore and that, Evans Head, there was one of the old guys there that you sat and talked to, and I'd love you to share that story with people here. So because I'd like the people who end up listening to this to realise that everyone's got value. This is the whole thing, that we get to a certain point in your life, you're not finished. There's something that you bring to the table that nobody else can bring, and you need that opportunity to be able to, we need, the rest of us need to provide that opportunity for everybody else to be able to do just that. So
there's thousands of stories, right? And this is the beautiful part of what we do in here. We listen, right? And we gather knowledge through people's experiences, and it's extraordinary. And this story is one that changed my life. Now I'm just going to check with Papa to make sure I got the right one. We're talking about Bill, yeah?
Yep, we certainly are.
Yeah, all right. So great.
because he was well into his 80s, and yeah, he was a tough nut to crack to start with.
Wow,
Do
very
you want to
much so.
quickly explain why you call Alan Papa?
Because he looks like Papa Smurf. Like, let's be honest.
Oh.
But let's also talk about that, right? So, what is Papa Smurf? He's an elder. He's there to support and listen and guide the Smurfs through life. Papa's an apt name for who he is to me. Guides, supports me, and strengthens me just with his presence. You know, and that's what our elders are here to do. You know, Papa can't run with me anymore. He can try, but he can't run with me anymore. But he can be by my side as we go through communities and support one another. You know, it's beautiful, and that's what our elder statesmen are needed for. And I love what Kerrie just brought up then, because the reason why the suicide rate, and Kerrie, this is just my personal view, but I'm tired of giving trigger warnings. Suicide's a part of our community. Just own it. It's part of it. Let's talk about it. Let's not avoid it. Let's not go, oh, this is going to hurt. It's what happens in our lives. So let's put it on the table and pull it apart. So thank you, because our elders, yeah, but our elder statesmen are more important now than ever. But I'll tell you this story about Bill. Now, Lismore a few years ago had the floods and absolutely devastated a lot of people. And there's a lot of older people from around Lismore that lost everything. We were up in Lismore to give hope, take a pair of socks and gift everybody a heartfelt connection. And the first night we were there, we went into town and we went to the local supermarket and we handed out some socks just to get our juices going, so prepare us for what we're about to embark on. 500 pairs of socks minimum into the communities throughout Lismore. The very first interaction I have the next morning is with a gentleman. His name's Bill. He's well into his 80s. I said, "G'day, mate. How are you?" He goes, "All right." I said, "How's things going at the minute?" He said, "Oh, you're here to talk to us, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I just want to understand how things are going." He goes, "Oh, all right." And then he started talking about his wife that he'd lost. And then he started talking about his boys a little bit, just a little bit. He goes, "Actually, mate, I don't want to talk to you." Fair enough. You've lost everything. You're here. I'm here with a big smiley on my shirt, handing out socks, bringing hope. Why would he want to talk to me? Anyway, we go over to do a presentation with Papa, Shorty, myself, Mars, John. We're connecting with everybody. Now, the corner of my eye, I saw him over at the washing machine doing his washing. So I put a pair of socks in my back pocket and I walked over. And I just said to him, I said, "Mate, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry that I didn't take that into consideration. I actually am really interested in your story. I just want to listen. If it's okay, I'm going to gift you a pair of socks." He says, "Oh, I need a pair of socks." I said, "I'm going to read the message to you on the socks." He goes, "Okay. Wear these socks with a smile. The black dots represent our dark days. We all have them. No one is getting out of that. The yellow is the warm winter's sun you can feel on your back on those gorgeous sunny winter's days. So in our darkest days, let the warmth of our community get around you. Share these days so that we can learn and support each other. The easiest way to do this is by putting these socks on with pride and sharing the story of them so that you can pass on the smile you felt when you received them." That point, tears. And I listened. He then came and joined the group. And I did a short presentation, just talking about our stories. After that, Bill wrote poetry. Bill came over with his poetry. And he had all his poetry there. This is trucker, right? That had lost everything, has no contact with his boys, had felt valueless, didn't have anything to offer. I said, "Bill, can I do something?" He goes, "What are you thinking about doing?" I said, "Do you trust me?" He goes, "Not really, but have a go." So I stood up on the table and I read his poetry to everybody. And everybody just clapped. his story, his heart was in this poetry. I get down off the table. He goes, Scott, I would like to wear the socks. Oh. I said, Bill, can I put them on your feet? Oh. He has sat in my heart forever. He sits in Alan's heart. He sits in everybody. He lives in yours now. That's the value of our stories. Did I do it justice, Papa?
Yeah, I think you did, because a couple of points I wanted to mention in there was the fact that how helpless he felt. There's a way that so many men out there feel at the moment because of the fingers being pointed at them, not being good enough and everything else, and really saying to themselves, well, how can I fulfill what everybody else expects of me? But also the wisdom that is there with the age, and that because hopefully as we all get older, we gain more experience, and that leads to more wisdom, etc. And then to be able to impart that to others and guide them, because boys are growing up without fathers and they're becoming the main perpetrators against women. That's where we break the cycle, is by engaging the older men, helping those men to feel valued. As Kerrie, as you said, those to become the men to become mentors for others. We don't have to be in a personal relationship with the mother. Our relationship is with helping the next generation come through, and doing it that way is far better than putting someone in Parliament to tell us what to do. Angela.
That's why I developed all of these tools that, I mean, I didn't develop them. I created a program that is all about, and this is not a sales pitch. I'm just saying I grew up in a family where the men did not have those skills. There was no conscious awareness. When I studied counseling, I traced back family patterns 4 generations, very dysfunctional family patterns that everybody was absolutely insistent on repeating. And when I challenged them, I was the scapegoat. I was the odd one out. I was, and now this is what I feel is changing, is people are now ready to actually say, you know what, we can change things. We can get out of this generational trance and, get out beyond this generational trauma. And that's why when we have the elders now, they come from a different place. My grandparents were still in that we need to repeat everything that we had, like, as you said, we need to become the clones. We need to become the same as they were. And now it's let me show you what I have learned, but I'm also open to learning from you. And when we have the skills to listen to each other, to have the challenging conversations, all of these things that make relationships so rich across generations, we can change. And so, mentoring men, I think, is wonderful. Mentoring women is equally wonderful. But I think I started all of this because I was like, I'm not going to do this with my children. I'm not going to repeat the same cycles that I went through. I want to have children that are self-confident, that can embrace life fully and can be who they want to be, not who they are, who their parents think they should be. And so, having these discussions is such, it just lifts my heart every time I come out of these conversations with a full heart. And I know they make such a difference when people listen to them, because they come to me and they say, and to you, to everyone, and say, I just had the biggest BFO, blinding flash of the obvious, or an insight, or, like, now I understand why. And it's just, and that's what we're here for, to support people. And I know it's a cliche, but this happy and fulfilled, and it doesn't have to be in the, when they talk about we need to bring the core family unit back together again. And well, maybe not. We have higher, longer life expectations. There are all sorts of things that have changed since we came up with, like with certain models. I mean, the fact that you have been married for such a long time, Kerrie, I take my hat off to you. It's an achievement.
Thank you, Angela. I know. Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, they're great words, Angela. I really agree with everything that you just said. And I was just, thinking as everyone's been talking that about the power of community. It's something that's become lost, but people like us are bringing that back together. And And as Scott was sharing, about what he was doing with Bill, it made me think about the fantastic event that I had on Tuesday night, my Stories of Hope event. And I actually had a man and a woman that were thrust into the worlds of violence for different reasons. And the guy had been really up high in a UK crime gang and lived a life of violence. And when I talked to him about what led him into that crime gang, he talked about the fact that he'd been put into the foster system, adopted out as a young child, like 1 or 2 years old, I think, and he lacked affection at home. And so he felt like in order to feel loved and accepted and approved of by his parents, that he needed to become independent and go out and make money and appear to be successful. And that was the driving force to gain that attention and affection that he was lacking. But he turned into quite a violent person, and it ended up being an extreme act of violence, which led to the loss of the life of his unborn child at the hands of someone else. That really turned him around. And in jail, he had a light bulb moment that his life needed to change. And that guy got up for the first time ever. He's now president of a really good bike group of a whole lot of guys that have come out of very similar backgrounds and hard times. And he got up in front of all of those guys and teared up and shared that story for the very first time. And all those guys from that bike group, along with others in the room who had tears in their eyes, got up and gave him a standing ovation. And it's people like that have been in the violent world, have acted with violence, that can get up and allow themselves to be raw and vulnerable and say to other men and women that this is not the way anymore. We can change. We are stories of hope. And so I think that guy's going to impact so many. Forget about a parliamentary appointment. The more people we can get sharing stories and being vulnerable and admitting, I was wrong, I failed. I had a past. We all have a past, but we are not our past.
Exactly.
And that's a really important message for everybody that's ever fallen down, made mistakes, people who have been perpetrators of violence, people who have been victims. We have a past, but we are not our past, and we can all change.
Exactly.
So I'm going to share something with you, Kerrie. The man sitting here with you right now. See if I get through this. When I met Papa, I had to share my story with him, and I thought he had no interest in me whatsoever. We went out for dinner. I spent my last of my money taking him out for dinner because I wanted his wisdom. He didn't know that. By the end of the 3 days, I had the most beautiful hug from a man that I've ever had. I saw him. He saw me. And we parted ways. And then he chose to interview me on the Campfire Project. I chose to share my story. And then I was away camping, and Papa rang me to ask me whether or not I would join him as a host inside the Campfire Project. And it scared me. I have a past. I haven't always been me. I've had to work really hard to become me. And I didn't want to wreck things for Papa. I said, I don't know if I can, because I don't want my past coming up and biting you in the bum. He turned to me and said, are you that man anymore? I said, no. He goes, I'll support you.
Oh.
I'm here today doing the things I'm doing because I have a support from a man who chose fatherhood to put his arm around me, give me an opportunity to become the best version of me. That is echoed into our communities.
Yeah.
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 You tell me how important mentorship and fatherhood is. I'm a result. I didn't have that. And I'm an amazing father. My son does things because he has mentors in his life. How many times has he called you, Angela, just to have a conversation to ask for help? He knows he's got you, Papa. You know, how important is this? You see it on my face. That's not pain. That's love.
That's such a great story, Scott.
We need to stop demonizing our men. We need to call them in, not out. Give them an opportunity to learn different so that we can walk together. Because I can tell you right now, we are beautiful. We love so deeply. You know?
Scott, I think the more that we can share stories like this, the more we can break down the doors of shame. For the guy, I'll talk about a guy now because this is what we're talking about. But for a guy that has maybe been a perpetrator of violence, the shame of telling anyone about that will often keep them in that place. So whatever's kept in the dark can never be dealt with. But by hearing a story of somebody else who's also been, say, a perpetrator or acted in violence, openly speaking about how their life has changed and how it can change, that gives them permission then to feel safe enough to go, hey, well, I can maybe open up and share with someone about that as well. And that, and when we can open up and be vulnerable, that's the place of healing, where healing begins.
Can I just make the comment on shame, the validity of the word shame itself? When we go out and we talk to people, we pass them the socks, we'd always say to them, we'd like to thank them for doing the best that they could. And people would ask us what are we talking about? And we'd ask them, did you make the best decisions you could with the information that you had? And that's what most people do. So most of the people who are walking around saying, I've got this shame, really need to have a look at whether they should be using that word at all. I've got a massive number of regrets in my life of things I would have liked to have done differently. But there's not one thing in my life, no matter what I've done, where I feel shame. Because I realised if I was trying to get rid of shame that was put on me by other people, that wasn't something that I deliberately went and did knowing I was doing the wrong thing, I can't get rid of that. So by putting the word shame on and it not being valid, then how do you get rid of it? So I would question everybody who's using the word shame in the first place to stop and think about that, because that in itself, I think for a lot of people will be a bit of a rethink on how they actually approach the next conversation they have, the next moment, the next thing they do. Because if you're doing it from a place of where you feel that you're shameful and everything else, you're not going to be feeling good when you're trying to do something good. It's going to be harder to do it. So being able to put that aside, Scott talks about it.
You have that revelation, because it's a revelation, isn't it? And unless somebody actually dares to talk to somebody about that, for them to say, well, that shame was never yours to carry, they don't realise that it's their shame to carry. So how did you come to that revelation?
Well, in my particular case, I just stopped and thought of all the things that were being said, all the things that people were saying, and I stopped and I thought about, so what's really behind this? What's the real meaning of it? Scott just mentioned about how, we spent 3 days in that, the workshops in Sydney and that, and, we came to this realisation. What he doesn't realise was that as he gave his talk in those first few moments, what was in the first 5 minutes we were really together, I knew the quality of the man. And I knew that backing him wasn't an issue for me at all to do. It was simple. And he thought it was a big thing because of the weight he was carrying. And I'm thinking, well, why are you carrying it? Because, you made decisions you've done in the past with the information you had, the situations and everything else you were in. There should be no shame or anything about that. So it was a matter of seeing him in a different light, letting him see, I could see him in a different light so he could then see himself differently. Yeah. Look at the man that we've got in front of us now. Look at the work he's doing. And And that's the other thing too, as a mentor's role or as a leader's role, our job is to make ourselves redundant by helping others to step up, to do what we're doing, to do it as well as us, hopefully even better than us. And that way, then we can step aside and let them go. I look at Scott and I know he's already doing a hell of a lot more than I've ever done. And I know the son he's bringing through, young Oscar, well, he's going to dwarf Scott as well with what he's going to do. He's already proving it. You know, and what is he now, 13 years old?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he runs men's dinners with me.
You know, this is like quality that's there. All we've got to do is, you know, if we want to be anything, and that, let's be miners. Let's go dig for the gems that everybody's got. Uncover it. Instead of pointing fingers and saying, hey, there's something wrong with everybody. Let's go looking for what's right in them.
So, okay, I'm going to share something, right? And I'm going to get killed for it, but I think it's really, really, really important, right? Because the journey of Oscar and I has been very public. It has been something that I have shared, I have loved, I've embraced, and that I encourage, and hopefully, you know, we'll get to discover more with other men as we go through it. Oscar's at the age where he's got a girlfriend. Yeah. And
how old is he, Scott?
just turned 13.
Okay, yeah.
Right? So it's, you know, puppy love, first girlfriend. Right? They've been communicating via message and FaceTime, and we had the discussion around girlfriends because he communicates very well at school. He's got more female friends than male. So we discussed around having a girlfriend at school because he does have a lot of female friends. I said, you don't want to create any issues in that. You love them all equally, so love them all equally. If you're going to look for a girlfriend, we're going to look for a girlfriend outside the school so that you don't ruin your friendship group, because your friends are really important right now. So he's met a girl through another girl at school. She goes to a school away from his school. Now, where do you think he would like to take her on his first date?
To meet you, to go around to your house for dinner.
Oh. This is
No.
what he was thinking for his first dinner. What first date? What do you think, Angela? What do you think Oscar would choose?
Sorry, the first thing came up was judogi or tennis, but that's probably not it. I don't know.
Okay.
Oscar is so creative. You know.
Yep. So I asked a group of guys where they think that Oscar would take them. They've all gone movies. I said, why? I said, because we get to sit next to the girl and we'd be able to be in their presence, and I wouldn't have to feel awkward and I wouldn't have to talk.
Yeah, that's why I don't.
We'll try and stop Oscar from talking.
Yeah, exactly.
Somewhere he can really talk.
I don't even know Oscar, so coffee date?
Well, here's his choices. He goes, Dad, I either want to go to the tulip farm or the strawberry farm, because I get to walk around the property in nature. I get to talk about the beauty that's there, and I get to share that with her. I get to experience what it's like to connect with her properly. I want to make sure it's done right. And he goes, but I've looked at that and it's in Monbulk and it's too hard to get to. And as much as, you know, I'd like you to take me there, I want to show responsibility and I want to get there by public transport together with her, because I think that would be a good step forward too. Also for me. He goes, so we had a discussion, and what we think is a great first date is to go to the botanical gardens where we can go and draw, where she can teach me to draw. So I understand that she's a great drawer. I don't want to tell her that I can draw, but I want to tell her I want to be there as she teaches me and I learn her skill set. This is a 13-year-old boy that's had the opportunity to be able to express his emotions at all times, is never hidden from a conversation, is given the opportunity to walk through things. My nails are bright yellow, and that's only a recent thing to remind me this is uncomfortable for me. But on the other side of discomfort is where the growth is. Now, here's the kicker. Turn around. The girlfriend and he have agreed on this. I've got no problems. Her parents are gone, it's a big step. They don't know Oscar. So he goes, listen, he goes, Dad, I think I've gone a little bit too far with what I want to do. He goes, I really love what it is. We've connected really well. I really want to take that time. Yeah, great idea. He goes, Dad, what do you think's a good idea? I said, mate, that's awesome. Thank you. I said, so now, given the circumstances that you two really want to connect, but our parents are nervous, what I think would be a great idea is if we all go out for dinner to a restaurant, we'll grab a meal with her parents and her brother, and you and Maya go and have a table to yourself so you can sit there and have a conversation and get to know each other while we get to know each other as parents. But Dad, that sounds like a fantastic idea. 13.
Yeah.
This is what's possible when we let people grow. Yeah. And
which is why I wouldn't hazard to guess where Oscar would take somebody on a first date. It's like, it's not traditional.
See, that's the whole thing. Here's a young boy who's definitely going to be one incredible man when he grows up. And how was that achieved? That was achieved by the people that around him.
There's no expectations on him, Papa. Like the one thing that we've talked about is you profiled him many years ago, and you told us that his musical traits were really, really important. So we followed that. Oscar's, he's going to kill me. He's going to, no, this won't get out anyway. But he's I know, right? But he's recording a Christmas album, singing in Michael Bublé style. He plays the piano ever so beautifully. Like all of these things have been designed not to make him wrong, but to build up his confidence to be able to step into the uncomfortable at any time and know there's an avenue through it. When we choose to support one another and find their hidden talents and give them the opportunity to be the best version of them, everybody succeeds. And I sort of feel like I've taken over a bit today, but I've got a story that I really want to share with everybody because I want people to understand the impact of supporting one another properly and taking the time to be curious. Angela, you and I, we're all over Ted Lasso. Be curious, not judgmental, right? This amazing human, ex-club member, went through a very significant incident where he had his house run through and was bashed brutally to the point where it created a lot of pain in his life and it needed to change things. Had a lot of different therapy options available to him. None of them will work because they were projecting at him. I had the opportunity to go and sit with him. I said to him, I got to understand him, his story, met him where he was at. And I said, if we're going to do anything together, I need a reason. I need a reason to actually spend time with you because my time's the most valuable thing. He goes, I want to be a grandfather and I want to get my license. This was 10 months ago. Now, he hadn't had a license for 31 years, lost it drink driving, was not an active parent, right? So he wanted to be a grandparent because he really messed up because of his actions throughout the years that he holds shame around, deep amount of regret. We sat down and we worked out a plan. We sat down and worked out what we can do to make this happen. 2 weeks ago, he got his license, right? Here's the kicker. Upon getting his license within 2 weeks, he's been able to take his son out on ventures on school holidays. His ex-partner, who he left at the aisle because of stupidity, we'll just say, has never supported her and hasn't been able to do anything, and she's always supported him. Her father ended up in hospital a couple of hours away. She rang him. He came straight over, took the kids. He had to support his daughter in a very tricky situation. This is just 2 weeks. I don't recognize that man from 3 weeks ago. I don't recognize him. His intrinsic value and self-worth because he was supported to get the things that were important to him hasn't just changed his life. He's now a mentor and role model to his sons and his grandchildren that he could never be because he couldn't be present. His presence is the most valuable thing he has. And the legacy he has changed because he's been supported by a mentor. Grandkids, kids, how many generations is he affecting by having the right support and love around him? We could have easily demonized him and left him as he was and labeled him who he was. But that's not the truth. Inside every man is love, and the reality is every single thing that has ever gotten him into trouble is because he cared. Because he didn't want to see other people hurt, because he's been so hurt himself that he wants to avoid that pain for other people. And if you hurt the people he cares about, he is going to hurt you twice as much, because that's where he saw the value. But now he chooses love. Let's stop demonizing our men. Let's stop calling them out. Let's start calling them in and find out what's important.
Thanks, Scott. That's pretty good point for us to start to wrap this up as well. We started the conversation and that because of the appointment in the Victorian Parliament, and we're worried about where it was going. But we don't just have conversations about talking about things that are wrong. We talk about solutions, and that's why I think most of the conversation's been about today, how we can do things differently. And the stories are important because we see the proof of that actually having worked as well. Not just this is what we think, but this is what we're living, this is what we're experiencing. So Scott, Kerrie, Angela, I really appreciate all of you being here. So if you just wanted to finish off with each of you, just a message you'd like to leave everybody. Angela, what would yours be?
Oh, I can just iterate, Scott. Love each other for who you are, not for what you should be and what other people think you should be, but connect on that human level. I think that, and get to know each other. Be curious, not judgmental.
Excellent. And Kerrie?
I think one good thing that's come out of this announcement in Parliament is that we're already talking about it. So, hopefully it creates positive awareness out there, and the jury's out, but hopefully great change will come. And I would encourage any guy that's watching this to, no matter what you've done or what you're going through or what you're facing, just find somebody that you can connect with and reach out to them and just start to open up and talk. And that's where the beginning of change will happen.
Thank you. And Scott?
No one ever makes a decision to make the wrong decision. If you do make the wrong decision, get curious about it, open it up, find somebody who's been there before or is experienced in supporting others to get curious as to how you can make better decisions going forward, because we only make decisions based upon the experiences we've had. With all my heart, I know you're doing your best. I wish you the courage to be able to have a conversation so you can grow.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. And so I'll just finish off very quickly with the fact that listen to people to understand them, not to make a judgment on whether they're right or wrong or anything else. Understand what's behind everything that everyone's doing, and that's so you get a bigger picture. It's like we've talked about going further and further behind everything to find out what really works and what doesn't work, and bringing it all together with all the things that we've got. So again, Angela, Kerrie, Scott, thanks very much for joining me here today. And I'm hoping that everybody who's on here got a little bit out of it. And for those in Be Connected who is hearing this as well for the first time, this is the sort of conversations we have, and we'd love you to come and join us. So again, to everybody, thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next campfire. Bye for now.